Today, I am going to talk about a mindfulness off the cushion. And this is a way where we can bring our practice with us into our daily lives and also add things that we don't practice when we are sitting on the cushion. So it's a way to integrate our ordinary, mundane lives with Buddhism and Buddhist practice. So this will apply to things that we do when we're at home, things at work, leisure, relationships, and so forth. The first point that I want to make is about creativity, that we have the ability to create our own life, to create who we are. And so what kind of a life do you want to create? Who do you want to be? How do you want others to look at you? And do you want to create a being that is more beneficial for other beings? So the idea of creativity is that creativity happens in the present moment. It does not happen in the past, and it cannot happen in the future. That, on the other hand, the present moment is full of potential, and we can use that potential for great benefit. The past is dead. The Tibetans use the phrase, the past is like a rotten seed, that nothing can sprout from it or grow from it. The future hasn't happened yet. The analogy they use is like the child of a barren woman. Barren woman being a woman who cannot have children. But what we frequently end up doing with our lives without mindfulness is planning for the future, filling up the present with all kinds of activity, and then living in the past through our habitual patterns. And when we live life that way, there is really little chance for creativity, change, little chance for us to realize even a little bit of our potential. So here is a quote from the Karmapa that I like. Whatever you create can be a means of expressing love, your poetry, music, or artwork. Whatever you do on a daily basis, cooking, eating, sleeping, getting dressed, all of these can be infused with love and compassion. Just going for a walk can be permeated with an open-hearted outlook. When all that you do stems from the motivating forces of love and compassion, then your actions become truly sustainable. So we have a lot of potential in the present, and we can use it in a way to be very creative. And also, I like the way he uses the phrase, can be infused with love and compassion. Love is, of course, wanting beings to be happy, and we, like all other beings, want to be happy. And so you could say that when he says infused with love, that he is indicating infusing our lives with happiness. And compassion is wanting beings to be free of suffering. And so in our daily lives, to do things that do not create suffering. And when we do run into difficulties, we do not have to hold on to them. I like to say that difficulties, and if you like, you could use the word pain, are unavoidable, but suffering is optional, that we don't have to get upset and emotionally charged when difficulties come our way. So mindfulness is paying attention to the details of our life. And it is, one aspect of it is just plain direct experience without having a commentator or editorials, just experience directly without a filter of our thoughts. You could say that it is, if you look, you might see something. And if you listen, you might hear something. So that's one aspect of my mindfulness that I'd like to talk about today. Another is what I call contemplating our relationships. Being mindful and aware of our relationships to the earth, to other beings, and so forth. The Karmapa has used in a number of different places the example of breathing and how it is the oxygen in the air that we breathe in. That's what we need. The rest of the gases in the atmosphere, we don't really need to live. It is the oxygen, and that the oxygen comes from the plant world. And that as a result of this, we have this very close relationship with plants and the earth in which they grow. And we have lots of other relationships that are like that. You could say the same thing for water, for food, and all kinds of other products that we use, substances that we use in our daily lives. And if we look at this very carefully, we'll see that we are constantly receiving benefits from the actions of other beings and benefits from the earth. That just something as simple as a piece of clothing that you wear, that the fiber had to come from somewhere, either synthetic or natural. And people had to produce that fabric. If it was synthetic, the raw materials had to be taken from the earth. They had to be discovered first. They needed the technology to extract that resource from the earth and to transform it into cloth. People had to design the article of clothing. After the cloth was made, it had to be cut out in the proper shapes, sewn together in the proper order, packaged and shipped to a warehouse. All the while, different people are doing different things. And once in the warehouse, then it had to be shipped to the store where it was sold. Again, more people are involved in this process. And then people had to run the store, order merchandise, and so forth. So just something as simple as an item of clothing is touched by many, many, many hands. And so when we buy a article of clothing or anything else, You could say we are benefiting from the support of a vast number of human beings as well as the planet. So it is very helpful to keep in mind these relationships that we have. And if we can look at it that way, we realize that we are being supported by a vast number of human beings as well as the planet. Now, another aspect of mindfulness that I'm going to go into is that mindfulness in terms of taking care of ourselves, making sure that we eat properly, that we get medical attention when we need it, that we have enough money so that we're not desperate for food and shelter, we're not homeless. But even beyond that, and perhaps even more important, is nurturing ourselves, being kind to ourselves, loving ourselves. Here is a quote from Traleg Rinpoche. Only a nurturing person can nurture, and a nurturing person is nurtured by his or her own caring attitudes. If you can develop these qualities, you will no longer have to go around like a sponge, soaking up the drops of love others leave behind. So taking care of ourselves has this aspect of nurturing ourselves, being mindful of what we need, and then seeing to it that we can receive this support from inside, that our subconscious gossip, if not nurturing, then when it gets into the negative, we are able to let go of it, where we are able to control this subconscious gossip rather than just let it run on and on and on. So love and compassion are very important to have for ourselves. Compassion is wanting our beings to be free of suffering, and we, of course, want to be free of suffering. So keep this in mind, that it is really necessary for us to progress, to have love for ourselves, to want ourselves to be happy, and to have compassion for ourselves, to want ourselves to be free of suffering. There is a detour when it comes to compassion that some people take, and that is seeing the suffering of another, and it causes distress in your mind. So when we see others suffering in this way, it acts like a trigger, and we want to relieve this stress of this caused by this trigger by doing something, perhaps helping homeless people, perhaps helping at a food bank, and so on down the line. But this is not a wrong approach, but it needs to be only a starting place. That this is not the goal. That again, when we find strong compassion arising in ourselves, accompanied by mental distress, then we need to look into things more deeply. That we need to get to know our triggers and uninstall these buttons. I will say this, that many people that I have worked with in a student-teacher relationship have difficulty being kind to themselves, having compassion for themselves. And again, I like to ask you if you can't love yourself, how can you truly love others? And how much love do you really have for yourself? How much nurturing have you been able to give to yourself? So with mindfulness of body, we pay attention to what the body is doing, what's going on. Things like eating. We can do mindful eating, which is eating in silence, and instead of being distracted by lots and lots of thoughts, concentrate on what you are doing. Concentrate on the sensations of moving the food to your mouth, having it then chewed on by your teeth, and so forth. The taste that arises, how quickly it arises. Lots of different things that we can pay attention to and find it very beneficial in doing that. And then after you're done, it's time to wash the dishes, and dishes can be washed mindfully. It would be, again, paying attention to the movement and the sensations in your fingers, paying attention visually to the whole process, but literally experience washing the dishes at a very deep level. The same could be said for driving. Walking is especially easy to meditate on because we have walking meditation. And walking meditation trains you to meditate purposefully and to keep coming back to the motion of the feet as they move and you walk. You could have mindfulness associated with the bathroom. Dancing, walking. These are all activities that we can apply mindfulness to. And with the application of mindfulness, we start seeing things more clearly. We start experiencing many things that have always been there that we were not aware of in the past. The next type of mindfulness is mindfulness of outer objects. So here it's important for us to have a spacious frame of mind so that we can, as I said earlier, we can listen and then hopefully hear. That we have a mind that is not condemning us and saying how we constantly screw up and all kinds of things. So we have this spacious attitude here. In some cases, you might have to make a hole in the dressing that Mayo makes when they're done with the surgery so that you can have access to the incision. It may be that you cannot have access to it. But anyway, we need to have a spacious attitude. If we are aware of the space when we then are out in the world, let's just say we're going for a walk in trees. And if you look at the tree, that there is a lot of empty space around the trees and above the trees. And it is this empty space that allowed the trees to grow and thrive where they are. If we have trained in walking meditation, which is very simply walking with a little bit slower gait than what we would do ordinarily, and then mindfully placing our attention on the legs and the feet and be aware of the feet touching the ground and moving and lifting up from the ground and so forth. This connects us with what's actually happening. We want to be able to just pay attention to what's happening, to drop our thoughts, drop the commentary, and just directly experience what is going on. If we don't do that, it's very easy for our thoughts and emotions to, you could say, hijack our common sense, our wisdom, perhaps even our ability to make good decisions. Here is a story that happened when I was working at the prison as a chaplain. In this particular prison, we had a rather large library of books, and the inmates could also check out videos and watch them in their room in their spare time if they had the equipment. And we also had a library in the chapel area, and it was a relatively large room. It was just a room. It was not a comprehensive going over of all possibilities. It was, it had a limited but a fairly decent selection in the various religious traditions in the world. And in Buddhism, there was no exception. There were quite a few videos. And people could watch the videos, but most people did not watch the videos. But if they would have watched the videos, it would have given them the opportunity to be more spacious, to come in contact with teachings that I have not given, and so forth. It was actually a very good book. Excuse me, a very good video, and many good books. So anyway, what I was talking about was this inmate had borrowed a book from the chapel library, and he had not returned it. So I had inmate workers there, and they would just send a notice through the prison mail system to the inmate saying that you got an overdue book, bring the book back. And this particular inmate did not respond, so they got a second letter. We called it a kite. Not sure why, but got a second notice saying that he had an overdue book, and he didn't return it. So then my inmate worker put a overdue notice with his name on it on my desk, and saying that he had tried twice, and our policy was if they fail to bring it back after 2 notices, that the chaplain calls up and tells them to come down to the office. So I did that. And by the time the inmate got to my office, he was a nervous wreck, completely stressed out. And this is why. As soon as they announced his name, and it was like, Fred Smith, go to the chapel. The chaplain happens to be one of the most, if not the most feared person in the whole prison, because the chaplain is the one that announces to an inmate that a family member has died or other bad news. And so as the inmate is walking out of the unit where he lives, other inmates were saying, oh, the chaplain wants you. This can't be good. There must have been a death in the family, da, 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 da. And the inmate is thinking the same thing. And he literally told me that on his way down, he started praying to God, oh, let it be dad and let mom survive. He was totally convinced that somebody in his family had died, important to him. And so when I saw him in this condition, I told him to sit down, which he did. And I said, you've got an overdue book. And he completely fell apart at that point emotionally. And we can do this to ourselves, and we frequently do this to ourselves, that we take things in our daily lives and put a lot of negative spin on it. And then as a result of that, we suffer a lot. And it's unnecessary. If that inmate could have walked mindfully to the chapel without attaching to these negative thoughts that he was having, it would have been a totally different story. So one very effective method to work when we are going through a mundane life is to, from time to time, just flash on the mindfulness of what our body is doing, whether it be eating, walking, sitting, using a keyboard, but just pay attention to the movement of the body. You can use sound meditation. I don't know if you heard it, but my neighbor's donkeys were braying a little while ago. And if you hear a very loud, and I will say this is my own opinion, but I find the donkeys braying a little bit irritating. It can be startling and so forth. And well, instead of having a lot of negative thoughts about it, just plain listen to the sound without editorial comment. And then when it's over with, you're done practicing mindfulness on sound. But it could be for any sound. You could even, if you wanted to do sound meditation, I have been present when lamas do this. And the point being is just listen to the sound and let go of thoughts about the sound. Yeah, you're at work and maybe you've got time for a break. Well, sit in your chair and try listening to whatever sounds are coming into where you are, but do it without interpretation. Just listen to the sound. And by doing this, we let go of our thoughts, and that automatically reduces the stress. It helps connect us to our own well-being. The Karmapa feels that it's really mentally healthy to go for a walk in a natural setting. And again, practice mindful walking. Another type of mindfulness I call mindfulness of mind. And again, it helps to be aware of, even if it's only for a moment that you note this, that our minds have a lot of space, that there's plenty of room to move around, plenty of possibilities if we have an open mind that is free of a lot of judgments, free of a lot of anger or anxiety or other strong emotions. And it's good to put extra effort into, you might say, leaning towards being happy, even if things might seem very negative. There's nothing wrong with, shall we say, putting a minor positive spin on things. I was just at a potluck with some old friends, old in terms of that I knew all of these people for at least 35 years. And like me, they're all getting old too. So that makes us old friends in two ways. And so I was talking to one, and he just say he is very upset and negative about where the country is right now, whether it be the environment or the division in the country, and so on and so forth. And we don't have to go that direction, even if we're with somebody that wants to. You don't have to listen. And Karmapa feels that it's important for our own well-being that we lean towards the, you might say, the happy or the positive side. And that this is a way of nurturing yourself. So being mindful of our thoughts, our moods, being mindful of our speech, and try to keep it uplifting and uplifted, and let go of negative judgments and so forth. If you are in a bad mood, well, bad moods don't come out of nowhere. They're created by our thoughts and the feelings that arise from the thoughts that we are having. So being in a bad mood, being stressed out, having a lot of anxiety, these can be natural markers that tell us it is time to let go of what's causing this, our negative thoughts. To use a digital phrase, this is an indication that we need to reboot and start over. In actuality, our mind is full of space. Our mind is limitless. And that it's full of possibilities. When we don't see possibilities, when things get solidified, then we develop almost a claustrophobic approach, that there is no way out. There are only bad directions that we can go in. We really don't have a choice. And so when you start feeling claustrophobic, when you start feeling very negative and judgmental and so forth, it's the time to kind of take a break and reboot and start over. And when we look within, when we are in a bad mood and having a lot of negative thoughts, is that we've got an inner critic. A monkey mind is another phrase that is used frequently. And that inner critic or that monkey mind is constantly telling us various things. Usually or frequently, it's things that we have done wrong. And we need to get to know that inner critic and get to know it very well. And become friends with it. But when we become friends with it, then we realize that what its tricks are, and realize we really don't have to pay it that much attention. We don't have to do what that inner critic is telling us, which frequently is, oh, I am a bad person. I did this, I did that. On and on and on, and in a very biased way, where it doesn't include any of things that we have done that have been beneficial. So we need to get to know that inner critic and put that inner critic in his or her own place. You could even examine what the thoughts you are having, and ask this question: what thoughts are important? Are these important thoughts? Are these trivial thoughts? Is there another way of relating to this situation that I'm getting all upset about and causing me to suffer? Well, I think at this point, I'm going to sum it up by saying we have a lot more ability to work with our minds and turn our minds to more positive directions. So now I'll open it up to questions. The question is that I liked what you said at the beginning about planning for the future, filling up the present, and living in the past. Obviously, you were talking about habitual patterns. So could you talk a little more about habitual patterns? And very simply, habitual patterns, you could look at it this way, that it is raining and the drops of rain are hitting the window randomly. But eventually two join, and then a third joins, and then they start running down the window. And then more drops of water run down that same path, and that's continuously. And our habitual patterns are like that. Another word that is fitting here is mental conditioning, that we are conditioned mentally to see things a certain way and to have preferences. And we like to have security and, if possible, certainty. Both of them are really difficult in samsara because of impermanence. But we get conditioned to see things a certain way. We develop habitual patterns so that we respond in a certain way. And it really gets very claustrophobic. And that's why we live in the past, We're living with these patterns that we have developed earlier in life. And the strongest ones we developed in previous lives even. And this is why they're so hard to break. Again, from my own experience, is that I could and still do respond in ways that I developed when I was a young child. And on the other hand, if we look more deeply, you might even say a post-mortem after we do something and we think that maybe I could have done a better job of that, or why did I end up here? You know, why did I end up here? I'm always ending up here. Do a post-mortem and examine things more closely. Why did I, these were the steps that it took for me to get here. Let's start at the beginning. Why did I react that way? And then why did I go over there, and so forth? And so really it takes some time to examine and investigate. Only you can do that. But the more that you see these habitual patterns, the more freedom you have. Again, another example that I've used that I think many of you have heard already is the scene in the Wizard of Oz movie where Dorothy, her dog Toto, the scarecrow, the cowardly lion, and I forget who the third one was. But anyway, they all come into the castle of the Wizard of Oz and they all want something. And in this castle, then there's flames shooting up in one room. There's a sound of thunder, and they're all scared and shaking because it's intended to be scary. And Toto goes over to this curtain and pulls the curtain back. And there is this old gray-haired man speaking into a 1930s style microphone, and he's got levers there that he's pulling and lifting. And Dorothy sees him. He turns and sees Dorothy, and he says into the microphone, "Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain." And the point is that if we pay attention to the man or the woman behind the curtain, that inner critic, we can see, you might say, that it's like a magician, a magical illusion, and start realizing that there are other ways to respond. Pema Chodron says this, when you get into a familiar situation and you start feeling like you're going to react in the same old, do something different. Anything, as long as it's different, you're starting to break the pattern.